Welcome back. I'm Teresa Bruno, the host of the Soul Talks podcast, and I'm so excited that we have Cindy Halsted back with us today to tell more of her story. So listen in. There are times that you felt as a young woman objectified for your beauty, for your femininity as a sexual creature.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And wow, interesting you say that. I just had another memory that came up because my hair was always in a ponytail. I never wore makeup. And I ended up auditioning sophomore year. So again, at 15 for the show choir where you had to wear red lipstick. And we were a very good show choir. We took second in the nation my junior year.
Oh, wow.
And I know in California, we represented the state of Michigan. And so it was another like avenue that got brought in. But to me, I did on stage and then I got off and I got to be whatever. The director of the show choir actually said to me, probably not in a very healthy way, you really need to wear more makeup. You should do your hair more. You should, and he said this to me alone in a room. And I remember thinking, I think some of the good parts of my mom would built into me identity of like, I'm okay. You don't get to tell me as a man how I should be. And so I can
Thank
remember
you.
like rebuffing. I know, right? Rebuffing and saying, why? Why do I have to outside of this? He goes, well, guys might be more interested in you as a girlfriend, not as just a friend. And I remember thinking, no, I'm not going to do that.
Good for
I'm not-
you. That's a lot
Yeah.
of strength at 15. It's
Yeah.
also you were pretty worked out to realize, you weren't pleasing him. You weren't a
Yeah.
pleaser in that particular scenario. I mean, I applaud that a lot. But you did carry forward some feelings of being objectified.
Yes, because then especially when I was in the pageant and, because then I ended up doing another pageant with Miss Teen of Michigan, and that was a bigger one and won that one too. So there was like 3 in a row and I kept entering them for the money.
But, it just doesn't teach you good things about your authentic self. It teaches
And
you to live in a mask.
And I think what started to happen in my life, and I didn't really realize that, is that as I was dressed up, I started to get attention from guys different than I was used to. But I felt them look at me and label me certain ways. And I remember being like, you're not looking at me. You're looking at the outside, and I'm making myself look pretty. And I honestly didn't like it. And I also had girlfriends or friends that I would talk to, and their world was like, how do I get a boy to see me in a certain way? And I was like, okay, this isn't who I want to be. Yet that attention was there. And then it started, I remember being chased once by a guy when I was at one of the pageants. And that's when fear started to enter in. Like, okay, I can't look a certain way. I got to be careful here. Not in a healthy way. It was fear-based. So it started to create for me, like, you got to be careful. You got to be, and as opposed to wise, fear started to enter at that point.
And you still sort of play in that place of, or what I've seen of you so far, like makeup's not important to you. Having your hair done's not important to you. You're not a clothes horse, and yet you're so beautiful. Like you're the woman I want to hate, but I can't.
Aw, I think,
But seriously, I want to jump around a little bit.
Okay.
I have so many questions for you.
Great. I'll jump with you.
So, so at 15, did you have a boyfriend?
No.
Okay.
My first boyfriend was, I think I was 18 or 17, and it was from a different school. My dad was also the coach, like, of the town. People knew him, respected him. I remember asking one of my close guy friends when I was 17, guys never do ask me out. He's like, you're Jim Kresge's daughter. No one's gonna ask you out.
You'll kill us.
I know. I'm like, my dad, he's so sweet. They're like, you see a perspective, but we know differently. So I remember being a little sad about that because I was like, well, And then it was a different high school, an all boys high school, where the first guy asked me out. And I went out with him and just had a fun time, but it was kind of like nothing. And it was, here's an interesting thing too, is my mom, she didn't over function with me. Like there wasn't a lot of warnings or a lot of, Cindy, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. So there was one guy I went on a couple dates with, and I brought him home, and my parents met him. And I'll never forget this. My mom looked at me and she goes, I don't think you should date that guy. I broke up with her right away. Because I'm like, which I say to parents, I'm like, save your reservings of no for when it was really needed. In hindsight, he probably was very dangerous. But I had no learning
You
about
didn't have a
that.
sense. Yeah, you didn't have a sense
No,
about it.
no sense of that whatsoever.
So when you did start to date, did you feel you had to be the made up, hair down Cindy of the pageants, or were you able to be the kind of jock girl who really loved being natural?
Wow, that's such a good question. I've never reflected on that. I don't really know, because when I was 18, I didn't really have my first boyfriend until college. And at that point, I was at a performing arts school, and there was a lot going around with that. So at 18, I think, yeah, I don't know. I think it was maybe a combo of who I presented as. It definitely wasn't someone super confident, but I also had a really close relationship still with my father. So I wasn't feeling like I was filling a void in any way in my life. I can remember being lonely. It's funny you say that, babysitting one time, and feeling like, gosh, I wish I had a boyfriend that could, treasure me and that I could be with. But it just, nothing came about then. I don't remember how I presented. Probably a little bit of a hodgepodge, honestly. I don't know.
I mean, I love the story of you sitting on the hill at 5 and going, God, I'm lonely. Or you like that God in the picture. That's such a beautiful, innocent place of a child's heart searching for, what is bigger than me. But as I've read your story and I've listened to the things I can find, I can't make sense of how straight the line is with your faith. The way it reads is, okay, I had this, come to Jesus place at 15, and I go to a performing arts school, and then I get in Tim Keller's, I get under his teachings, and I babysit for them, and then I feel very led to go in ministry, and I meet this great guy, and I've just always been, now I'm in transformational leadership, and I've been in some of the biggest movements in the church in America, and I've started stuff, and now I'm leading this huge, amazing coaching thing, women leaders. I see a lot of tracks in your life, but I want to go, didn't you ever go, maybe I'm just following somebody else's path and this isn't for real? Or, I mean, was there ever deep questioning anywhere?
Yeah. There was some formative things that I haven't talked about much, but almost like little miracles, I could say, that happened. So I don't know if you want me to share those. Or...
I just want to know, because you're a brilliant woman. You're a thinker.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome. You're a thinker. You dive deep. You sit back on it. I don't think that's just new in your life.
Yeah.
So I get what I'm digging at is how did you come to such absoluteness in your faith?
Okay, so there's a few things that happened early on in my faith walk where I think God just solidified a knowledge that He was there. Now, it didn't mean it translated into my soul. So when I'd have depression and that I would know I'm His daughter, but I had confidence that He was there. And first thing I thought of when you asked that question is when I was 15 and I had this moment with Jesus and everything happened. It was not 3 months later that one of the gals who also went to that church came over. And I said to her, I was like, we were downstairs. My dad built this house, like I told you, on the hill. The back part of it opened to 10 acres and there was a woods. So nobody went to that back part of the house as far as strangers, because we were, away from people. Well, I said to her, towards the end of our time together, I don't trust the Bible. It's confusing to me. I look at it, I don't understand it. Someone would give me the copy of The Way. I don't know if you remember that Living Bible way
Living
back
Bible
then,
the way.
40 years ago. And I was like, wait, what? I was so confused. And I didn't have any education, or I didn't say this, but I didn't go back to that church, believe it or not. I hung out with some of the kids, but I stayed at my other church. So I was really lost on where to go. And so I said that to her. I said, I don't trust the Bible. And I stood up with her. We walked out. I took her to the door. She left in her car. I went back downstairs to the back door to the woods to let my cat in. And when I opened the door, there was a track on the floor, on the ground, that said, why you can trust the Bible. And I was like, wait, what? And it was an immediate, like, I stared at it and I thought, I just walked her out. She doesn't know this. Where did this come from? No one. And it was in this moment of like, okay. And I picked it up. I was like, are you answering me? And I didn't even read it. I didn't read it. I went and I put it down and I picked up my Bible and I started reading. And I just assumed God answered me.
Well, but I mean, that's such a moment of faith and trust and believe in something that you really didn't have a lot of grounding in. I mean,
No.
you believed in that moment that God answered you, and yet
Yep.
you weren't very formed inside with any kind of
No.
deep belief. It's interesting to me that you say something like that, because I know parts of your story, and that, years later, reading the Bible through in 90 days became a pivotal piece of your life. Yeah, I just keep wondering about, like, and this is something I want to explore, but you've had a lot of dark moments of the soul. You've wrestled with mental issues, depression, maybe even will to live at some points. I'm not sure how you would define it. But those are big beats in your life of dealing with that. In those dark nights, was there God questioning?
That's what's interesting. I don't know if I just have a gift of faith. I didn't question God. I questioned who I was. I went more towards, am I enough? Am I okay? I don't know why. I just never questioned him. And when hard things happened, there was a clear time I remember moving away from God, and realizing I didn't like what he was doing or what I thought he was doing. And so I moved away for a season, but I didn't really question who he was. I'm not sure why.
Not ever.
I don't remember a time. I mean, my early days, I was alone in my walk. And so there was some other things that happened. Like when I had to decide between a school to go to, I was just very naive. I didn't have anybody telling me what God couldn't do. So I just assumed, oh, this is what they did after I started reading the Bible. Oh, they'd ask God and God would tell them. Okay. So I can remember thinking, where am I going to go to college? I got to start 16, start applying. So I put all these schools before me. I really thought I was going to go to a big school. And I don't know, I think it was from one of the pageants. There was this one school, American Musical and Dramatic Academy, located in Manhattan. So I had like 7 schools, like University of Michigan, UCLA, like all these different schools, Northwestern, and then I had AMDA. And I remember saying to God, okay, I don't want to apply to each of these because my mom said I've got to pay for the $50 application. I don't want to do all of them, so you tell me where to go. Left it like that. No joke. The next day, that school called me. I don't know how they got my number. I don't know if it was from the pageant, but I just remember going, oh, that's your answer. Okay, so I went and told my mom and dad, hey, I need to go audition in Chicago for the school because that's where I'm going to go to school. And they're like, what? I'm like, I know, but I just know. I just know that's what I'm supposed to do. And I was so naive. The only growth I had was Christian radio. I would listen to Christian radio and be like, oh. And so it was those formative years of just creating, I think, such a strong belief system for me that I didn't really question God. Again, I questioned myself. I questioned, and I think it was my father too. You know, a lot of times a father who adores a daughter, I mean, I've learned that through counseling, I've learned that through my studies. That just, he was so there for me. He was so dependable. Interesting enough, emotionally, he couldn't meet me as I got into high school, and I really needed my mom. But those formative years where I felt so adored, I never doubted that my dad loved me.
So that modeled what you thought a good God was.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Very
actually had
few
to deal
young
with,
women have that.
I know, I actually think I had some survivor's guilt as I started getting into ministry and started especially counseling. Like, this is not, unfortunately, I think our norm. And that made me so sad. Yeah,
But but you did have a lot to wrestle with young because, and the thread that comes forward is that as you lost your identity in sports and the world was blank for you for a minute, it got
yeah,
filled in fast. You're a doer, you make it happen.
yeah.
But you started to have depression, right?
Yeah, and that really came out when I went off to school at 18 to New York City. And so I can remember it was every spring, so it was probably seasonal in a way. I remember not knowing what to do. It was like March, and I felt lonely and depressed. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to do anything. And so I decided, I can remember this moment, I decided to call my mom and let her in because I hadn't for probably 4 years or so. And I just called and I said, Mom, I feel like something's wrong with me. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't have anything to blame it. I just don't. And her response blew me away. She goes, oh, you get like this every spring. And I was like, what? And she goes, oh yeah, March, April, I watch you kind of go downhill. Then you spring out of it. I'm like, huh? Like, we never talked about it. I didn't know anything about it. And then it was like, oh, I started like looking up things. It was like seasonal depression. I was going through that, and it was just normal for her. And she goes, well, do you want to talk to someone? And I was like, okay. So I went and talked to this counselor once, and I remember wasn't really helpful, which makes me sad. I think what was more helpful was my mom normalizing it at the moment of just saying, you've been through this before, you come out of it. So I think a little bit of that hope was helpful at the time. But when it really got tough is after I got married.
Yeah.
Because then you have little kids that rely upon you. And it could make me cry. I was just thinking, they're 2, they're 3, they're 4. And I wanted to pull the covers over my head. And many times wanted to not die, but maybe just, I don't want to function. I can't handle this.
And was it still seasonal, or was it then triggered by other things? Did you have, this depression that you dealt with more than in, March and April?
Yeah. Probably, I think that increased as pressure increased around us with having 3 kids. We were in a 2-bedroom apartment with a 3, 5, and 7-year-old in Manhattan, and then I grew up on 10 acres, so it was like so different. And my husband was running this ministry that was thriving, and he was doing better and better, and I felt I was going more and more downhill. So the seasonal seemed to, as the pressure increased of life, I didn't have the skill set to manage it. I didn't. And the hardest part is I'd try to tell some people about this, and they would try to fix me.
Yeah.
They'd be like, well, I can't get a meal on the table. And they'd say, well, do you have a crock pot? And I'm like, no. And so I did have little kisses of help through friends like Mary Clayton and Julie. I had some that normalized it and saw that for me and who sat with me. That was like a lifeline. But it was, I really thought there's something wrong with me. And people would say, have your quiet time. I'm like, I'm trying, but nothing's going in. And it
And
was
you
just
never got counseling and you never had medication in those years, right?
no, medication was like a no-no. Counseling was slightly a no-no at that. I mean, this is, I don't know, 30 plus years ago. So it wasn't normal at that time. Actually, a friend's advice meant the most to me. He said, you know what? Some of the great leaders in the past, Christian leaders, suffered from depression. Maybe instead of fighting it, just like sit in it and be okay with it. And I was like, it actually validated a little bit and made me feel slightly better, but it definitely was a problem. And my husband's so sweet. He tried. He was such a fixer at the time. So he tried when I was like, I get really down. He went into fix it mode and would like take care of the family and everything, which was extremely helpful. But I hated that part of me that couldn't get beyond just the depression at times.
Next week on the Soul Talks, Cindy shares how deeper counseling and connecting with her dad's coaching legacy helped her develop her purpose.